Hello and good afternoon. I am Dr. Ritesh Kumar, the Director of Wetlands International South Asia. Wetlands International South Asia is an international nonprofit which works for conserving and sustainably managing wetlands and their biodiversity worldwide. Our motto is for nature and people. We are working for a vision where wetlands are treasured for the biodiversity they harbor and the range of benefits they give to the society. Wetlands International globally operates in 20, we have 20 offices, 100 countries worldwide. I lead the South Asia office, which is based in New Delhi. The term wetlands has two ends to it, so wet and lands, and that is the beauty of the definition. These are areas which have water permanently or seasonally, and this water could be at surface or near to surface. But there are ecological signatures. So, how do you know you are in a wetland? So, you are in a wetland when your shoes are getting wet. Either you jump over, a land and it creates a puddle, so you know you are in a wet. And every so these are there are two ecological signatures, two or three ecological signatures. The presence of water, either permanently or seasonally. The second is there are specialized plants which can survive only in water. We call them hydrophytes. So we know water lily, we know water hyacinth. These are plants which can survive in water. So their presence tells you that you are in a wetland. And third is a soil type, which develops under long flooding condition. So these are a couple of signatures that will tell you that you are in a wetland. Uh, but in 1972, Ramsar Convention, this is a global treaty on wetlands, which has been signed by 172 countries worldwide. But that gave a very wide scope of definition, which talks about any body of water standing or flowing, uh, salt or fresh water, uh, is a wetland, provided on the seaside. When you move to the sea, the depth at the you know at high tide does not is less than 6 meters. Now, 6 meters. You would ask me what happens at 6 meters and what does not happen at 6.5 meters. So, Ramsar Convention came out of interest for water birds, birds which require wetlands to survive, and it was presumed that birds which can dive in the coast can dive no below than 6 meters. So that's why this 6 meters came in, and that also gives us a boundary to demarcate wetlands from seas. But there are deep sea coral systems, for example. So within Ramsar Convention, the river, even if it's a flowing water, is considered a wetland, and there are several river stretches that have been designated as Ramsar sites. So the Ramsar definition was created to be all-encompassing, to allow any kind of ecosystem which had conservation values to be designated. So it is a broad sweeping definition, and ecologists and practitioners are at loggerheads, asking what is a wetland and what is not wetland. The definition is not important, but the conservation objective is. So let's settle at that. Now, so what does a wetland look like? Let's discuss. So when you walk out of your home and look at any body of water, so you will be looking at a lake, bodies of water which have plants growing over them, which we typically call marshes, even trees growing into them, small wetlands, small ponds, village ponds, tanks, uh, in high altitudes, lakes, and even human-made systems, reservoirs, dams, water treatment plants, irrigated agricultural lands. All of these qualify to be wetlands, and they are indeed wetlands. So in 2011, India created its own national wetland atlas, which was the first time an inventory of wetlands using satellite data. and partial ground truthing. The satellite data was about 2000 of the vintage 2006 and 2007. It turned out that 4.7% of India's landmass is uh, is a wetland, and 15.26 million hectares in terms of area. And so these are about 70% of these are inland wetlands, uh, uh, which are you know which do not have any active connection to the sea, and the rest are coastal. In terms of number, we are looking at 7.7 lakh wetlands. The beauty is India is a country of small wetlands. So, of the 7.7 lakh wetlands, 5.5 lakh wetlands are of an area which is smaller than 2.5 hectares. Now, again, you'd say, why did we go ahead with this cutoff of 2.5 hectares? So, since we were using remote sensing has a resolution beyond which it cannot detect an area, and that area was cutoff area. The data that was being used allowed it to be confident on any area which is beyond 2.5 hectares, but below 2.5 hectares, it was identified as small wetlands. So, all said and done, India is a country of small wetlands. In all landscapes of India, I must say, wetlands are present, right from Trans Himalayas, glacial lakes, to the coast where you have mangroves, uh, coral reefs. In central Deccan, these are in the form of tanks. In the Ganga Brahmaputra basin, these are the form of marshes, lakes. So when the river moves, it creates lots of floodplain wetlands. When a river expands and shrinks, it creates an area which is inundated during floods. All rivers have large floodplain wetlands, and the ones of Ganga and Brahmaputra and their tributaries are pretty special because of their size. In the northeast, again, you have multitude of oxbows, tanks, depressions. In Loktak, in Manipur, they are called as parts. So everywhere we use have our own, terminology for wetlands, and that is possibly one of the difficulties where people say, is it this is a lake, not a wetland, or this is a johar, not a wetland. This is a tank and not a wetland. So wetland is an all-encompassing definition. What we are seeing is these are types of wetlands that we are referring to. There are, I think, every language, every terminology has a connotation for wetlands. And one term that we often use is water bodies. So, are wetlands water bodies? I would say yes, all water bodies are wetlands, but wetlands are not just water bodies. Now, let's look at the term water bodies talks about an area where water is stored. There are several wetlands wherein water passes through. For example, if you look at on the coastal side, you have mangroves. Now, these are areas where if you go to Pulikat, you move down to Point Calimar in Tamil Nadu or Sundarbans in West Bengal. So these are trees inside wetlands. These are specialized trees which have their roots which are standing outside water, outside soil. New metaphors that they call to survive high salinity levels. They don't actually store water as you would expect in a tank and a lake, but these are wetlands because of the signatures, which is plants which are adapted to water life, hydrophytic life, or soil that evolves in saturated conditions, which is hydric soils. So all water bodies are wetlands. That's a truth. And wetlands are not just water bodies; they are more than water bodies. Why wetlands are required? So first thing, water when it moves in a wetland, it slows down. So it slows down, starts running water, starts walking, and by doing so, it starts doing beautiful things. First of all, water starts storing. It stands in water, and then the edges of the wetland they start recharging groundwater. It gives you an accommodation space. So suppose a landscape has floods, it can be routed. It is routed into a wetland, and wetland becomes your shock absorber. The plants in the wetlands, they pick up nutrients. They pick up the elements that they deteriorate water quality. And there are several cities which use wetlands for their water treatment. An interesting example is of Kolkata city. Now, Kolkata city was evolved on the banks of the Hooghly River. in the 18th century, all the muck of the city, of the mega city, was given to the river. But it also led to the rapid pollution and series of plagues, which the British engineers were highly, seeing this as a problem. So they saw to the east of the city where swamps, and these were saltwater swamps. Nobody used them, so they diverted the waste to the East Kolkata wetlands. So there in East Calcutta, something interesting happens. The sewage of the entire sewage of the city is put into a series of farms. So sewage is settled, and then the sewage is used to cultivate fish. So when the sewage settles, much of the sediment, the harmful sediments are locked. After a week or so, it is allowed to be used for cultivation of fish. And then from fish, it goes back to cultivation of vegetables. And then it further goes down to be used for agriculture. And when the water moves out of the wetland, it is fairly clean, reoxidized. So sewage treatment plants are a modern construction. The wetlands were in the landscape since ages, filtering the waste, and that is why they are called kidneys of the landscape. Much of the food that we eat, it is grown, cultivated in wetlands. Several wetland types, as mangroves, can lock carbon 50 times more than the tropical forest sea. Carbon sequestration, the carbon that is available in atmosphere, it is brought locked in the form of biomass, by bringing it by soaking the carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide inside the plant biomass, so that the plant grows, and the plant locks it up in not only its biomass, the leaves and the stem, but also in the roots, and then it locks up in the sediment. So it is like acting like a sponge, trapping everything that is in air. So wetlands are very effective. Certain wetland types, such as mangroves, are very effective carbon sequesters, and much of their the biomass, leaves, the litter, the soil is very carbon rich. So peatlands, for example, these are found in high mountains. The mangroves on the coast, these are very effective carbon sequesters. That's the reason why we it is important that any climate mitigation action also involves conservation of wetlands. So these were some of the direct benefits, as water is becoming a pressing challenge, and wetlands are where water, groundwater is recharged, and water is available in the landscape. But we also have our cultural connections with wetlands. Imagine of any religion, any part of the society, any temple, mosque, churches, there would be a wetland around them. If not, humans would construct. So this is so for temple tanks in South India, they're a classic example. Or in North India, people do Chhat festivals standing in water. So without wetlands, these festivals would lose their meaning. And also, societies had their own ways of managing wetlands there. So they would agree on common rituals. So in Bihar, there was a festival before monsoon wherein the entire village community could get together, clean up their wetlands, remove silt, debris in the wetland. And then when the monsoon comes, it is ready to receive water. So wetlands are present in all parts of the landscape. When the glaciers melt, the melt of the glaciers is stored in high altitude wetlands. These wetlands we can't even see; they are located above the snow line. So therein, these glacial melt is stored, and they act as sponge. They gradually ooze water in the landscape. Gradually, they will be releasing water, and that is where the rivers, these are the river headwaters, are located in these regions. Ganga, Brahmaputra, all are major rivers, Himalayan rivers. They originate in high altitude wetlands. That is what keeps the river flowing. And then it comes down, and then it creates what is called the Terai region, wherein you have the tigers between India and Nepal, and then you come down further. The same, wetland regime becomes a source of agriculture and fisheries, and then you come down to the deltas and coast, wherein you have mangroves. They are You can see them as isolated wetlands, but the logic is they're all connected. If a high altitude wetland does not function, the river's perenniality will come down. Floods are extreme flows of water, so wetlands are shallow depressions. So water would find its way into floods, and wherever cities have protected their wetlands. So Palaikarni marsh, for example, right in the heart of city. So when Chennai receives a lot of rainfall, so it acts as a space where floodwaters can be accommodated. It will stay there and it will be absorbed in the groundwater. And most of the cities have thereby conserved their marshes. And wherever we have destroyed our wetlands, urban areas have become very vulnerable. Hyderabad, Chennai, New Delhi, cities have actually eaten up their wetlands. I must say, cities, the growth of cities, we have killed our wetlands, and in the way, we have made our cities more vulnerable because cities are very parched. They no longer have water storage areas. And even if I'll talk about all these mega IT cities, Gurgaon, Hyderabad, Gurgaon, for example, if it rains for even 1 hour, the entire electronic city is underwater. So water will need a space to be accommodated. And floods these days are completely human creations. Bad engineering, bad land use, bad development, which leads to floods. So the important role thereby is flood buffering, and not only floods, it is also about drought buffering. So when, especially in central India and western India, we get long periods of low rainfall, and if this is where the landscapes which have ponds and tanks, they're able to store water. We have seen classical step wells, for example, which were constructed in Gujarat and others. Udaipur, for example, the construction of wetlands is such that every drop of rainfall will end up in one wetland or the other. So it will trickle from the topmost wetland. If that becomes full, it will go down to the next. The wetlands were built on an elevation. So the first one, the top one fills first, then it spills over to the second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one, and finally into Uday Sagar Lake. And the name used was Sagar because that was the biggest tank of the whole of all was known as Uday Sagar. So that was the importance for humans, but there are numerous life forms that depends on wetlands. Numerous, I would say, wetlands are where life has evolved. It is believed that the first form of life evolved around wetlands in Africa, and most interestingly, migratory species when the temperate regions, the poles become very, cold, water birds, they start moving out and they move out to the warmer regions, which is where India is, to the tropics. And on the way, their migration, they use wetlands as their hotels. They would come to a wetland, stay there for some time, gain energy, and then fly. And this is called a flyway, as we have highways, So there are flyways. So these are imaginary routes, not imaginary, but these are routes through which migratory waterbirds they travel from the tropics all the way, from the temperate region to the tropics and back. So India is a part of Central Asian Flyway, and we receive anywhere between 200 migratory bird species, water bird species in a year. Sites like Chilika, they receive as many as 10 lakh migratory, water birds in a year. Or if you go to Vembanad Coal in Chennai and Palaikarni, so this is winter is the ideal time. This is where the poles would be very very cold, so they're arriving in all parts of India. They will go from here to Sri Lanka. And then when it becomes warmer here, so towards February, they will start flying back to with their children. And a single bird can travel up to 12,000 or 13,000 kilometers non-stop.